to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast, the most listened to daily Miami Dolphins podcast on the internet.
Miami's got the Dolphins, the greatest of all.
Come on, Dolphins fans. Time to fins up.
We're in the air, we're on the ground, we're always in control. And when you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl. Cause we're the Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one. Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins number one.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast. On today's show, I am joined by Justin Melo of the Draft Network. You can follow him on Twitter or X at JustinM_NFL, and of course at thedraftnetwork.com. Justin, how you doing today?
Doing well. It's Thursday. We're officially a week out. Excited that it's finally here. A lot of hard work has gone into this process for me, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out next weekend.
Yeah, and you guys do an outstanding job at the Draft Network. Great stuff. You're on top of the stuff year round, and I know for you guys, it's like your Super Bowl here coming up with the draft. And let's talk about the Dolphins. That's what we do here on our show, on our website, on our podcast. And I want to start in the secondary because with the news from earlier this week with Jalen Ramsey, cornerback was a need for Miami, but I think it really cemented itself as probably the biggest need in this draft for Miami. So round one, pick 13, two guys who might be there: Will Johnson, Michigan; Jahdae Barron, Texas. Which one do you have ranked higher? Do you think one or will one of them be there at 13, or is there a chance they're both gone by 13? What are your thoughts on those two players?
Yeah, I've got Will Johnson ranked higher. And to be honest, it's not particularly close for me. I know that that's maybe not the consensus at this point in time. I'm of the opinion that we will look back and think that we overcomplicated the process on Will Johnson. Going into the 2024 college football season, we were talking about him as a top 5 prospect. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and ignore the reasons that may no longer be the case. I don't think he was quite as good this past year as he was in 2023. Of course, for the national championship winning Wolverines, they weren't as good as a football team this past year. I think he suffered from that a little bit. And then the pre-draft process for him, he's muddied his own evaluation a little bit, right? Refusing to work out. There's questions about his long speed. I get all that. I'm just making the decision to trust the tape. Personally, I've got a high level grade on this guy. But there is a chance that he's going to be there, for Miami when they come on the clock. So it'll be interesting to see what decision they make. To answer the second part of your question, I don't think there's any chance that they're both gone. I think it's far likelier that they're both there than it is that they're both gone. And certainly one of them will be there if that's the direction they want to go in. With Barron, it's a little bit scary to me. That I think it's a bit of a projection. Does he play outside corner on a full-time basis at the next level? Or is he a nickel? Is he a guy like the safety they lost, Javon Holland, in free agency, where he kind of moves all over the place? Yep. You need those guys, and that's important. But if they're looking for a boundary corner in the first round through and through, Will Johnson and Barrett, they couldn't be more different from one another. So very different players, in my opinion. I'm higher on Will Johnson, to summarize. And I think there's a chance, I'd almost guarantee that at least one of them is there if that's the direction they want to go in.
Yeah, and I think Will Johnson is more of the scheme fit, more probably of what they're looking for. But because they did lose all 4 starters in their secondary, they'll find a spot for Jahdae Barron. I'm sure they'll find a spot for him because they have needs in the secondary everywhere. And if they don't go corner and they do pivot and go safety, Malachi Starks, Georgia, Nick Emanwari, is 13 too high for either one of them, you think? And how do you see those two compared to each other?
I think it's a little high on Emanwari, the safety out of South Carolina. I know he blew the lid off the NFL scouting combine, and that's sort of where that buzz started. I didn't see the same athlete on tape, in all honesty, that put up those numbers at the combine. I don't think this is a top 15 guy, and I don't think the combine should elevate him to that status. I am really high on Malachi Starks. I think he's probably the player in this class that's most similar to Javon Holland and what they lost there in Miami. I talked to him the other day. I got an incredible interview dropping with him this
Oh,
Monday
cool.
on the Draft Network. There are teams that think he could play boundary corner, and there are teams that think he could at least play it rotationally. I like him in that Javon Holland role where he just does everything. I think he's best at the nickel. I think he comes downhill. I think he could play, single high, two-man coverage. Really high on him. I don't think 13 would be too high based on my personal evaluation. I'm not getting the vibe that he's going to go that high. But when it comes to comparing player to player, prospect to prospect, I'm higher on him than I am on Jahdae Barron, for example, because I think I'm more comfortable with I know what I'm getting in Malachi Starks. With Jahdae, I think I'm moving him around more so because I don't know what he is. Whereas Malachi Starks, I mean, me personally, I know exactly what he is, and I think teams feel the same way. Really high on that kid out of Georgia. Excited to see where he lands on draft weekend.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me a little bit. Not exactly the same type of player, but someone who Miami took a few years back in, Minka Fitzpatrick. Strong safety,
Right.
free safety, a little bit of corner, versatility. Starks kind of fits in that same role. So I could see our general manager being like, well, I had that guy, I lost him, and here's my chance to make that right maybe and get someone kind of similar in that regard where you can slide him around a little bit. So that wouldn't shock me. But again, I think their secondary is just taken such a big hit, especially with the news this week of Ramsey, which caught kind of everyone off guard, that a guy in the secondary, whoever it is, at 13 would not be shocking. I think it's kind of expected. If they don't go that way, the other area of need is defensive line. And three guys here: Kenneth Grant, Michigan; Walter Nolan, Ole Miss; and Harmon of Oregon. Again, 13 too high for these guys. Which one do you have kind of ranked highest? And if they were to take one at 13, which one of those three?
So I'll start by giving you what might not be a popular take for Dolphins fans, but I know you guys are hyper focused on the secondary. That's the vibe I'm getting from everyone I talk to in that market.
Well, after the Ramsey news, yeah.
Certainly, and I get it. I'm not saying it's crazy by any stretch. I'm more concerned about the trenches in Miami.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think it's so important to, I mean, you look, I know it's a cliche, but you look at what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl. Like, everyone talks about that D-line, but let's not forget the O-line as well over there is potentially the best in the NFL, certainly one of the best 2 or 3 O-lines. When I look at Miami, I am not comfortable with either side of the ball on the trenches. That's where I would focus my energy with this 13th overall pick, would be in the trenches. The D-line specifically, I think Zach Sieler is one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL. I don't like what they have next to him at all. I think Benito Jones is okay, but then it's like, I look at the depth chart the other day, and I know it's, we're in April. We don't look at
They have nobody next to those two. Those are the only two guys they got.
Right. Like, I saw Matt Dickerson. Like, I'm a Titans guy. I was like, oh my Lord. I didn't know Matt Dickerson was still around, let alone he's at the top of that depth chart right now. I mean, so I would go trenches here. We'll probably talk about the O-line in a second, but to focus on the D-line, I like all three of those. Derek Harmon is the one. I do think he's going to go in the first round. I think people might be a little surprised at how early he goes. I don't know that it's going to be 13 to Miami, but I think the Bengals are a great fit for him just a couple of picks later. I think the Steelers, if they don't go quarterback, he might be their choice there. So, no, it's not too early. And the range of outcomes on him, I guess this is a scary thing. It's wide, right? Like, I think I talked to a scout recently who said he's got all Pro Bowl potential, if he puts it all together. But there are inconsistencies on tape, and there are flashes where he, quote unquote, disappears. I'm really high on Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. I think he's a bona fide first-round guy. When you pair his first-step explosiveness with just his sheer power and the ability to just overwhelm offensive linemen down there in the trenches, he's violent, he's physical. At 13, can you reckon with the fact that this is probably not a high-end pass rusher? I don't think this is a guy that's going to give you 10 to 12 sacks per year, but he's going to give you, 6, 7, and they're going to be highly impactful because he's going to be consistently in the backfield and rack up pressures and TFLs. So, and then your final one there, Walter Nolan. I mean, I think that would be the biggest risk they could take there. Again, scouts have raised a lot of red flags from a character and effort perspective on him. I think you can get him later than 13. And yes, I think there's Pro Bowl potential there if he puts it all together. But there's also like he's out of the league in 3 years if this goes totally left, right? So there'd be a huge risk with Walter Nolan there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think why, at least from my perspective, I think they might go corner in round 1 at 13 is because if you look at Chris Greer's track record, which I know you probably haven't dived into that too much, but someone like me who dives into that, the past like 5 or 6 years in rounds 1 and 2, he particularly loves to draft premium positions: corner, offensive tackle, quarterback, wide receiver, edge. And interior, like nose tackle, defensive tackle. Outside of Wilkins, he really hasn't done that in round 1. And I think this draft sort of shapes up where that is such in this draft that there's a lot of talent there. And in rounds 2, 3, 4, he might be able to get someone there where corner is a spot he's going to love, especially after this week. I could see him going there first and then circling back in the next round to the 2 trenches, which is kind of how I think this might play out. But you're right. Either trenches, look, they need help in the trenches in the worst way possible. We talked about it there. I also think the kid from Texas A&M, Shamar Stewart, might be in play here as well. Not necessarily interior, but kind of an end, maybe to replace what they lost in Wilkins 2 years ago. I think he's in play. Those guys would not shock me, though, if he did go there.
And I will quickly, I'll quickly add to your strategy. This is a deep class on the interior, in my opinion, and I do think they can get a good player on day 2. I think there's going to be a ton of them that go on day 2. Darius Alexander out of Toledo is one that I'm incredibly high on. Tyleik Williams, the Ohio State guy, is really, really good as well. So if you're kind of taking a bird's eye view on this, if you will, I think you get a great corner, great secondary guy at 13, and you probably feel really comfortable about coming back in the second round and still getting a real good interior defender, a better one at that spot than you could say a corner.
That's exactly my thought process, because I have followed this guy forever, and I got a feeling that if I had to bet a buck, that's probably what he's going to do, because he loves corners. If you just look at Cam Smith round 2 just a few years ago, didn't work out, but he took him there. Noah Igbenogany round 1, he loves cornerbacks early. Guys didn't work out, but the thought process says that's where he takes them early. And I think, like you said, those guys round 2, the kid from Texas, Alfred Collins, probably round 2, that range-ish pick, 48. That might be a little high for him, but somewhere in that range. Wouldn't be shocked to see them do that type of move. Offensive line, look, this has been the bane of the existence of all Miami Dolphins fans. And if it wasn't for the other 2 needs we just went over, I'd be like, we got to get an offensive line in round 1. So they took Patrick Paul round 2 last year, top 60 pick. It was like pick 55 or something. Didn't really play much, but when he did play, when he played left tackle, not the right, he was a disaster at right tackle, but he's not going to play right tackle. At left tackle, it was okay in very limited snaps. Austin Jackson, they paid, and he's there. Mind you, he's always hurt, but he's there. So I don't think they go tackle. But at 13, they're probably going to take a tackle who can play guard. So, 2-part question. Will Campbell, Armand Membo, any chance they're there at 13? And if not, Kelvin Banks, is he there at 13? And in your opinion, can he play guard?
Yeah, great loaded question. I'm glad we got to this one, because I'm starting to think that Will Campbell, if he doesn't go 4 to the New England Patriots, and I know that's the betting favorite and everyone thinks that's going to happen, I'm not as sold on that happening as the general public is, and I'll tell you why. As a guy who covered Mike Vrabel in Tennessee for a long time, Will Campbell's got the, let's call it what it is, historically short arms to play left tackle, historically short wingspan to play left tackle. I can't sit here and tell you I know for sure what Mike Vrabel thinks about Will Campbell, but I can tell you what he thinks about guys with short arms. He did not do that. They drafted Peter Skoronski when Mike Vrabel was in Tennessee, and they kicked him inside to guard. They didn't even entertain the possibility that he could play tackle. So I have a hard time believing they're going to draft Will Campbell at 4 and play left tackle. I know this isn't a Patriots show, but I bring that up.
No, you're right.
I bring that up to say if Will Campbell doesn't go 4 to New England, I start having a really hard time figuring out who's going to take him in the top 10. So if he's there at 13 for the Dolphins, I love that for them, because he's going to come in right away and play left guard, right? And that's a huge need, and he's plug and play there. And I'll say the quiet part out loud that they wouldn't admit. If Patrick Paul does not work out,
You got someone in the house already. That's right.
You've got a potential option that you kick outside and you give him, you at least, he was an outstanding left tackle in college, and maybe they wouldn't do it. Maybe they would have the same. He cannot play tackle. He's too short-armed. But if they think it's a possibility, you've got a plan B in-house. And remember, you got to use premium draft capital on these guys. So you're almost getting a 2-for-1 here. You're saying, hey, he's going to play left guard for us right away. And worst case scenario, maybe I have my left tackle of the future if Paul doesn't work out. And guess what? If that's the route I have to go, maybe it's not ideal, but if I do go that route, it's a lot easier to find a left guard later, right? If I do end up having to kick Will Campbell there. I think that's a sneaky possibility for them if he's there. I don't think Armand Embo is going to be there, and I'll tell you why, the Missouri kid. I think there are some really good fits for him in the top 10, whereas I have a harder time getting there with Campbell. Maybe he's a fit for New England at 4. If they are going with one of the tackles and they don't like Campbell, maybe it's the Missouri guy. If he doesn't go forward to New England, and I said I couldn't find a fit for Will Campbell, I start looking at teams that have huge holes at right tackle. I look at the Vegas Raiders have one at 6, the Jets have one at 7, and the Saints have one at 9. I think all three of those teams, because Missouri is a right tackle, all three of them, I think, will be higher on him than they are on a Will Campbell, because with Campbell, you're talking guard or you're talking left tackle. I don't think anyone is projecting Will Campbell to move to right tackle when you don't even know if he could play tackle at all, right? But with the Missouri kid, he's a natural right tackle, right? So I don't think Embo will be there for Miami, but I do think there's a good chance Will Campbell, I think there's an underrated chance based on what the general public thinks that Will Campbell is there. And that's something I would think long and hard about if I was Miami, based on the need at guard and the potential need at tackle. To finish with Kelvin Banks, I do think he could play guard. I think 13's a little early. I look at some of those teams in the back end of the first round, like the Houston Texans, the Baltimore Ravens, who might take a lineman in the late 20s, even a Kansas City Chiefs at 31. I think the Dolphins can probably do better than Kelvin Banks at 13.
I agree on Will Campbell especially. And I think for me, and this is going back many years, when I hear all this stuff about the arms, the guy he reminds me of the most, like I said, it's going back years, Justin Pugh. Justin Pugh was a first-round pick of the Giants, and he was a left tackle at Syracuse.
Yeah.
Well, the minute he was drafted, we'll try him at tackle, but he's a guard. And his whole NFL career, he was essentially a guard. And I think Will Campbell, at 4, Justin Pugh in 19, 20, 21, somewhere around there. Will Campbell at 4 to me does seem a little off. I'm not sure if it happens. And I could see the Patriots actually throwing round 1 a total monkey wrench if they take the running back from Boise and not everyone's going to scramble after, I thought he'd be there for me, and he's not there.
I am predicting in my final mock draft that the Patriots do pull a stunner at number 4, because I don't think it's going to be one of the tackles. And if it's not, no matter what it is, it's going to surprise people, because everyone thinks, and look, for their sake, they wish it was one of the tackles because they need to protect Drake May's blindside. I don't think there's one of them in this draft worth going number 4. So unfortunately, do they force it? I tend to think they won't. And keep in mind, this is a deep tackle class. They might be able to get one at 38 that can play left tackle, right? If Connerly is there out of Oregon, if Ariante Urturi is there, just Simmons, they might even come back up. They've got some capital. They could come back from 38 to 30, 38 to 29, and make sure one of them is there. I have a feeling you're right. The Patriots are going to be the ones to throw a wrench in this draft. Because, again, if they do anything other than tackle, if they take one of the pass rushers not named Abdul Carter, if they take Ashton Genty, as you just alluded to, which I wouldn't rule out with Mike Vrabel's history with Derrick Henry in Tennessee, I like where your head's at, because mine's in the same place.
Yeah, and if I am Miami, if he's there, Campbell, he's probably the one guy I'd be okay taking over a corner, because in round 2, you're looking at Trey Amos, the kid from Florida State, who probably might be there. The kid from Kentucky could slide, I guess, to pick 48. So that would be totally fine for me. Last question, and I'll let you go. Chris Grier. Now, when you talk Dolphins, quarterback's always on the outskirts of any conversation. And are they going to take one of the top guys? No, they're not going to take one of the top guys. They got 10 picks, though. They got 2 picks round 4, 2 picks round 5, 3 picks round 7, pick 98 at the end of round 3. And I'm thinking earliest is 98, probably not even that though, probably around 4 or 5. Not the big guys. We're not talking Sanders and Ward, and we're not even talking Dart. We're not even talking Milrow. Schuff, I believe his name there. Probably not even him. From that group, if Miami was going to roll the dice around 4 or 5 between the Quinn Ewers, Kyle McCord, and those guys down, I'd say, is there one of them he's like, you know, I kind of like that guy a little bit. Might be worth taking a flyer on when you got multiple picks in 4, 5, and 7.
Yeah, the one that I like the most out of that second or even third tier group, you might call it, is Will Howard out of Ohio State. You know, that's the, you know, I thought what he did this year was outstanding. Probably doesn't deserve enough credit. Ohio State the year before, I thought a big reason they couldn't get as far as they wanted to go was because of the quarterback spot. They did not have good quarterback play in 2023. They bring Will Howard in. I mean, he completed what, 87% of his passes in the Natty. He was like 17 of 21, a bunch of touchdowns, 0.
He had the big pass in crunch time at the end, which
right. And I know that the supporting cast was great there, and they didn't ask him to carry on his back. I still think he deserves a lot of credit for what he did this past year. Really rehabilitated his pre-draft stock after he wasn't looking so hot coming into 2024 when he entered the portal. If you, I don't know if you saw, but like John Gruden's been doing this series where he's sitting down with the quarterback. The one with Will Howard, man, it kind of made my skin crawl in a good way. Like I feel that there's something there. I do think he's more talented than I'm more comfortable with him in the range he's going to go in than a Milrow or a Dart, in all honesty. Like, give me him in the 4th round as opposed to one of those guys in the 1st or 2nd. I can't get behind that at all. So I like Will Howard. I like where your head's at. I think the Dolphins have too many needs to go with a quarterback, even in the 4th round. But like you said, when you've got a ton of picks and you've got a concerning injury history with Tua, and again, Dolphins fans might not want to hear it, but this is starting to look like it could eventually get to rebuild status, right?
We're there now. After Monday, we are there now.
The holes that are, they might trade Tyreek Hill as well, right? Like the holes in the trenches, Ramsey, what's going on with Hill, these aging superstars, they're starting to creep towards rebuild status. Maybe it doesn't work out 3 years from now with Tua. If so, you get behind the notion of taking a flyer on a quarterback now and seeing if he can develop into your guy. For me, that guy would be Will Howard.
Yeah, and they have 10 picks right now. If they trade Ramsey prior to next weekend or on next weekend, you're probably at 11 at least. They got a pick to burn on a quarterback if they want to.
Absolutely.
And I think it probably would be wise. Again, not one of the early picks. They have a million needs. But when you get to like around 4 or 5 even, you can burn one there. Could take a flyer because he's always hurt Tua. And they have to factor that in the conversation. But Justin, thank you so much for a few moments every time. Everyone be sure to follow Justin Melo at thedraftnetwork.com and all of his work at the Draft Network. And of course, again, on Twitter, X, whatever we call it this week, Justin M_NFL. Justin, I know you're super busy. Thank you so much for a few minutes today.
No, pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Hey guys, Mike here from DolphinsTalk.com. Just want to thank you for watching this video today. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this video. And also just thank you in general. I know you have a lot of other podcast options out there these days, whether it's with the Miami Dolphins or about the Miami Dolphins and with non-Miami Dolphins podcast stuff like true crime, politics, NBA, Major League Baseball. We do appreciate the support you guys provide us, and we do thank you for watching our content. We appreciate it more than you'll ever know. So thank you so much. Just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And also, don't forget to sign up for our Patreon service. Go to patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. And for just $3 a month, you will get more Miami Dolphins coverage and shows. Patreon.com/DolphinsTalk. Thank you again, and everyone have a great day.